So, what are timers and lerps? Timers and lerps are two different ways that you can animate stuff in blueprints. We're gonna start with lerps, and the lerps basically means linear interpolate. It's kind of changing numbers over time. So if I type lerp, we can see this float lerp, there is different versions. And what I have here is every tick I want to set the character's rotation. So what we are going to do is have this lerp and we see how it basically works. So you have A, B. If I put 90 and we need alpha here, I'm also going to break this. So we're just going to rotate character on Z. So he rotates around. How this works is basically this value determines if we are on the A point, B point, or anywhere in between. So I'm going to type get seconds, get time seconds. So if I do something like this, when the game starts, every tick we're going to set the character rotation, and this seconds is going to increase from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, and we should see our character rotate around, and that's basically what we see. So it's pretty simple to use. You can animate. The one big thing is that you have to kind of deal with it on every tick. So you have to set this animation to happen on tick or use timers or something like that, because it won't trigger by itself. It just tells you based on alpha which number you need to have between A and B. And it can be also above this number. It goes from 0 to 1, but if I do clamp and put it to actually 0.1, from 0 to 1, it's gonna stop at 90. But before, as you saw, we were just rotating around. So if this is 2, then this is gonna be 180. If this is 3, it's gonna be 270. So that's kind of to keep in mind. If I clamp it, it should just rotate in 1 second to 90, and that's about it. And if you want to kind of make the animation go slower, we can do something like this. So we are basically dividing. So now 1 becomes 5, which means that we're gonna need 5 seconds to come to the same point like we did before. Pretty easy, pretty simple. Keep in mind, since you're doing this on every tick, that means it might get performance. It depends on what you're doing. So setting the rotation is not that big of a deal, and these nodes are not too expensive, but keep in mind, again, doing it on every tick, if that's 80, 90, 100 ticks a second, that's a lot, especially in blueprints. But there is few drawbacks to this that you won't have in timelines. So in here, lerps are pretty primitive, as you can see. So to just create a simple animation where something goes slow from 0 to 90, we had to use clamp, we had to use divide, we had to get the world seconds. So we had to do a bunch of stuff just for a linear animation from 0 to 90. It's kind of, you cannot create any complex animations, or you could maybe, but you would have to do a lot of work manually, and also you have to manage it on every tick. But it's pretty simple to use for any animations like gates opening, doors opening, something like a lever getting pulled and maybe rotates, stuff like that. Lerp is completely fine and nice. Timelines can even, depending on how you use them, maybe get a bit expensive, but lerps are completely fine and even preferred when you're doing simple stuff. Now, if we want timeline get a bit more complicated. So first, we cannot use them on event ticks because they are already delayed. We could technically use them, but it will be really inefficient because they're not made to tick on every tick, but to actually be triggered once and then they play the animation. So what I'm going to do is take this and put it on begin play. And what I'm going to do is play from start. And for timelines, we have a special thing where we can double click them and then open this up, which is basically a graph where you can kind of create curves for animation of the timeline. So if I click track, I can use color, event, vector, and float. For now, we're just going to do simple float, but depends on what you want. You can use this. And let's name it Z rotation. And now this looks a little bit confusing. And to be fair, they could have made it a little bit nicer, but what you can do in here is basically create your keyframes. So this is like any keyframe software. So I'm just going to create a keyframe, create another one. And we can say, let's do, if I click on this keyframe, we can do, so at time 0, we want this value to be 0. And then for this guy, we want at time 2 to be value 1. So after 2 seconds, we want to put it to 1, or we can even do 90. So basically we can say, if I'm animating this object from 0 to 90 to go in 2 seconds, we can put it in here, or we can put it generic where I set it from 0 to 1 and to value from 0 to 1 second to value to be from 0 to 1. Then we can maybe manage and modify that value in here. and basically say if we divide it by 5, that's 5 seconds. If we divide it by 2, that's 2 seconds. And we can also multiply it if you want something to go faster, or we want bigger values, stuff like that. So that's kind of all up to you how you want to manage. So if you're using this on multiple different places, maybe you want to make it more generic, or specifically for this you want from 0 to 19, let's say 2 seconds. Then what we want to do is finish or update. This basically means for 2 seconds, this is gonna update every tick. And also after 2 seconds, finish is gonna trigger. So if you have any code that you want to do after the animation is finished, you would do that. Also, I forgot to take this. And you also have the start time, and you can also do reverse. So let's test this out, see how it works. And it took approximately 2 seconds and we get to 90. And as I said before, you can do this, maybe divide it, but since we have their internal time, it should only go to half or 45 degrees. Because keep in mind, the actual time of animation is inside the timeline. We are basically dividing the 90 by 2, getting 45, but the timeline doesn't know that we just divided something. So we are just getting kind of the half number, not the extending the animation. Good thing about timeline is that it's kind of customizable. As you can see, you have multiple execution pins, you have multiple output pins. You can select if you want vectors or floats and stuff like that. You also have some options for lerps. I only showed you this lerp, but you also have a rotator, transform, vector. You can do a bunch of stuff. So yeah, you have a bunch of options. You also can do a reverse, so if you're playing it from the start and at some point you want to reverse it, you could also do that. You can stop it also after some time. And you also have the direction, so you can actually get information in which direction you're going. So maybe you want some different events to trigger if you're going forward or backwards. So yeah, that's basically timeline. I usually use it for things that I need more control over, so the actual reverse or play from start. So maybe if I have a gate that can open or close, not just open or just close. Imagine you're having a character go onto a button, stand on it, but when he moves from it, the door should close, and when he's standing on it, the door should open. So this is really easy way to do that without much hassle, while if you were creating that effect from the beginning without the timeline, you would have to do some fancy stuff where you save the current position or the current interpolation point in the animation and then reverse it from there, stuff like that. You have to manage it all by yourself. But yeah, to recap, timeline for more complex animations, you have some more control, but this is kind of latent action, so you just trigger it once. And then lerps for some more simpler stuff, a bit more performant and stuff like that.